And now I'd like to give a very warm welcome to today's panel moderator, Sam Lee, General Partner at Ludus Capital. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam. I started my career as an attorney and moved over to the MBA. Have spent about 10 years in the sports industry before moving into the investment side of things. I have a personal portfolio of over 50 sports tech startups that I'm either investing into or advising, including one unicorn and a few material exits. My partners at Ludus Capital and I are in the process of forming a early stage sports tech fund, and we're hoping to close by the end of the year, and we're looking to invest more into this space, which we find to be extremely exciting, and we think that there's quite a lot of potential in it. Very happy to be moderating this panel. As I was telling the panelists today that I actually have met almost all of them previously. So it tells you that this is a very special and small industry. So looking forward to today's panel and what they have to say. So I'd like to bring all the panelists on at this moment and for them to introduce themselves. So maybe we can start with Brian. So Brian is the co-founder of Beyond the Game Network.
Hey, Sam, thanks. Glad to be here. Thank you to Kiwi Tech as well. I run a group called Beyond the Game Network out of Atlanta, Georgia. We're a group of about 30 former pro athletes, mostly former NFL players and business and tech execs. We invest in startups across the sectors being talked about today. We've made 15 investments in seed to Series B companies over the last 3 years. And about half of those are in the entertainment space, sports, media, esports, and gaming, and the other half are in human performance, fitness, health and wellness, sports training, and performance. We then bring a group of about 30 pro athletes to work with our portfolio companies as brand ambassadors, content creators, make introductions to pro and college teams, and anything we can do to be helpful and useful for our portfolio companies. Thanks, Sam. That's about it.
I'll give a shout out to Brian's newsletter, which is something that I subscribe to and I read. So everybody should get on that one. Next, we have Joe DePriest, who is the managing partner and co-founder of Next Up Ventures.
Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it. So I spent most of my career at Monumental Sports, the CMO of the Capitals, Wizards, Mystics, Verizon Center. I think Sam and I just missed overlapping on the NBA side. I launched Monumental Sports Network, the first OTT for regional sports. From there, really got into the investment side with the launch of Next Up Ventures about a year and a half ago, and our initial investment in StarStock, an online sports card marketplace. Since then, we launched a series of demo days to help startups launch and raise money, as well as now we're launching a $3.5 million seed round fund, hopefully closed by the end of the year. Complementary to that, we have Next Up Partners, which is more of a consulting network of 1099s to help the startups from the earliest stages up to growth stage to really be able to grow and build their business along with them. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Next, we have John Sarasani, who's the founder of GlenQuest Capital.
Thanks, Sam. How you doing? John Sarasani. GlenQuest Global is a family office where we focus on really anything technology, but we developed a vertical in the sports and entertainment space. And the reason we got here was because my background is as a former athlete. I played football at Notre Dame and Northwestern. And in this second phase of my life in venture capital, I wanted to be involved in some things that are more exciting than not exciting. So I've been happy to say that we're in some higher profile companies currently. We usually enter during the seed or Series A. Not to say that we can't do later rounds. Try to network our companies with each other. For instance, I'm involved in a couple different companies with high profile athletes. Like Aaron Rodgers is in one of them, Kevin Garnett's in another one. I'm a co-invest with Roddy White from the Atlanta Falcons. We're just involved in a number of different things. So in addition to bringing capital to the table, we also try to bring our network with startups that we work with. Thanks, Sam. And by the way, Kiwi, thanks for including us. This is a great thing you guys have going here.
Thanks, John. And John and I met through a company called Game On, which we're both involved with, which just listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange recently. Next, we have Stefan, who's the managing director of Capital Nova, based out of Europe.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sam. Thank you for hosting this. Kiwi, thank you as well. Looks like I'm the rookie in this group here. I'm doing sports VC since 3 years. I have a normal portfolio management and finance background, doing this 10 years before, company building and investing. As I said, I played basketball in my youth, so I'm honored to have the ability to work in my two biggest and combine my two biggest passions since 3 years doing sports and investing. I have my own little investment vehicle, growing this currently and working hands-on with the startups, especially focusing on one I'm also the managing director of. And I'm looking forward to this round. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to learn and to exchange our ideas here.
Perfect, Stefan. And last but not least, we have Garrett, who is the CEO of Falk Ventures.
Hey, Sam, great to see you. I want to thank Kiwi for this opportunity. My name is Garrett Clue. I manage all the venture activity for the family office of David Falk, who most notably represented Michael Jordan along with many, many other Hall of Fame athletes. I've been involved in sports for 25 years, 10 of those as an athlete, and was fortunate enough to represent the US at the Olympic Games. Subsequently, I worked at the games in Vancouver, Beijing, and London in different capacities, and have been a part of financing businesses, helping founders, and working with athletes for the last 15 years. So excited to be here and excited for the conversation.
Perfect. So let's just jump right in. Everyone here is quite excited about the sports industry and the investment into sports tech. I would love to know what you guys think are the main factors behind the rising interest in this industry. Brian, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I guess the biggest factor from my perspective has just been the meaningful exits that have happened in the industry. Whether it be in the betting space, companies like DraftKings and Barstool, Peloton, Mirror, and a variety of others, whether it's betting, whether it's media or content, whether it's the fitness space, there have been some seriously meaningful exits and some big and very high profile, successful growing companies, everything from GOAT and StockX in the sneaker space to ClassPass in the fitness area, Oura Ring and Whoop in the wearables and tracking technology. There's just been so much success in this space that's created so much buzz. It's bringing a lot of great eyeballs and a lot of good activity.
Perfect. Anybody else want to jump in here with thoughts?
I'd say, at least in the States, the loosening of sports gambling laws from state to state have really had a major impact. Here in Chicago, we just changed the rules, I think a year ago, and all you do is see commercials for gambling websites now. So I think that's drawn attention. The other thing that I would bring up is just the overall popularity of esports in general. I'm watching the Olympics 2 weeks ago, and they're talking about esports becoming an Olympic sport. College campuses are offering it, at least at a club level. They're talking about it becoming an NCAA sport at some point, which is not far-fetched at all. That'll be a reality soon, I think. So I just think the overall attention to this category is really elevating the space.
Yeah, that was actually the first question in our Q&A. Someone asked if when do we think esports is going to become an Olympic sport? So I think that's definitely of interest. And I think with the pandemic, the esports has taken up a lot of people's time. Stefan, what about in Europe? What are you seeing in Europe that's different?
I think, as you discussed, US is moving ahead here, but I think in general, it's the main factor for me, at least, and what I'm discussing a lot with other VCs looking at this space. It's an emotional market, and an emotional market, that's what I know from portfolio management, is always good because people are willing to pay a premium. So I think what we have is this reach of sports, which is a global reach. You can have a huge audience, everybody feels connected to it, but on the other hand, you have this strong regional focus with, for example, the teams, and that makes it pretty interesting for all of the companies that want to reach a consumer to use this as an entrance to get the consumer into the product. So I think that is, to add what all of you said, I agree, but I wanted to add here this point, which I think coming from a more new perspective and the outside perspective, the emotional part is very exciting. And we see this, in Europe as well. There is now the first sports we see is growing here. But again, I think the major difference is that US is more like real connected, stronger to the entertainment, whereas in Europe, especially when it comes to comparison football to soccer, well, you say soccer to American football and the NBA and stuff, there it's more the entertainment character, whereas football, what we named soccer, is more like really hardcore fans, and they are now getting it into a more entertaining space.
And yeah, Joel, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the sports team aspect is a big piece of it too. I mean, you look at the valuations and the money that they're getting for media rights these days. It used to be when I first started on the team side, sports was always kind of trailing the play in terms of youth tech, development, the digital space. And now with the ownership groups that are out there, there's a lot of money going into it, and the opportunity to monetize that has really driven a lot of it.
And Garrett, I was actually going to ask Joe and Garrett this question. You guys have spent a long time in the traditional sports industry. Are you seeing the convergence now between the sports tech industry and the sports industry, and is that another reason for the increased attention on the investment side?
Yeah, like I think of it sort of in two different ways. There's new tech, which is sort of the esports and NFTs, and then there's legacy businesses. And if we start with legacy businesses, a lot of traditional sports businesses were run very inefficiently. Whenever there's lots of inefficiency, there's always innovation. So I think that we've now hit this sort of tipping point where a lot of these inefficiencies within sport business are getting stripped out with technology, right? And whenever there's asymmetric information, there's in whatever business, it doesn't have to be particularly sports, there's always innovation that equalizes over time, right? So when you think about, just the sports space, whether it's ticketing or sponsorship or valuation or sales, these are rife with inefficiencies, and technology is slowly stripping out some of these inefficiencies and making way. So that's sort of the way that we view the landscape.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Garrett. And I was actually wondering when the word NFT would appear in this panel. I had it over under at about 10 minutes, so you're right on the dot there, Garrett. And so I guess that actually leads right into my next question, which is what are the key trends, right? NFT is one that we talked about. Esports is one. Betting is another one. Brian, are you seeing anything else that you think would be good to highlight here?
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about kind of esports in the gaming space, I'll throw the other buzzword of the day out, which is metaverse. Whether it's the big companies like Facebook, Roblox, Fortnite, Epic Games, trying to build the platforms, whether it's some of the startups that we've seen across the industry trying to put pieces together, bringing in NFTs or other digital assets that are for sale within it. The metaverse is coming fast. I don't think anybody knows exactly what it's going to look like, whether it'll be a fully immersive VR, Ready Player One, or some piece together mobile console PC version. Something's coming, and it's coming fast. Consumers want it. The major tech companies are going after it. Startups are flying into the space. So that I'll nominate that one, and I'm sure that was in your over under bingo for the event.
Well, I think that's very tightly related to NFTs, and I'm sure we're all seeing a lot of interesting companies in that area. Joe, what are you seeing in your part of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw out another buzzword, NIL. I mean, we're seeing a lot, and I think that's opening up a whole universe of demand for brands and media partners to engage with, and so it's really an arms race to find those properties and start monetizing. I know the athletes are eager, and so we've met with a lot of companies there. And then AI, machine learning. There's some companies, eStat AI in the esports space is doing some really cool stuff there, and that's really come to the forefront also.
Perfect. John, on your side?
I'm seeing everything that was just mentioned. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'd add in the gambling piece. I think there's a lot of, I'm getting a lot of pitches, a lot of pitch decks for I'm going to say founders coming up with creative ways. I don't want to put a negative connotation to it, but to kind of get around certain laws. Like for instance, the state might have one gambling license of taking bets, where a totally separate kind of license for fantasy, but that fantasy sports might look totally just the same as regular wagering. I'm I'm seeing some do that as well with sports gaming within like a lottery type of system because it's allowed that way, or even horse racing tied into like NFL or NBA games. And I guess I could draw it to DraftKings popularity and their desire to make acquisitions. Okay, so I guess that's why it's coming. We could all predict why it's happening, but I'm getting flooded with pitch decks like I just explained.
Yeah, I think within subvertical, as Brian mentioned, the fact that there are a lot of successful companies and unicorns leads to potential M&A opportunities, and that's one of the reasons that you're seeing an influx of both investment as well as startups in all of these spaces. Stefan, anything to add from your side?
Yeah, I would go for, I think you can agree to all of what is said. You can separate in content and distribution. I think this is like the two major fields I would see companies running up. And I see that now even clubs and leagues understand that they want to have more owned and operated content. So really controlling the assets is, I think, one of the major trends that we see, especially through the pandemic. They are all realizing they need to have more digital content and they need to be better prepared to distribute them, or to be better prepared for negotiations with the big distributors in the market.
Right.
We have more of the whole value chain of what they are creating, and not only on the pitch, but also off the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Cool.
And Garrett, do you want to give a plug to esports maybe?
Yeah, no, actually, I was going to go a different direction. So,
Okay.
I think first of all, everything's been covered. That's, I agree with all that, but I think there's some examples of some really unique innovation. And if you look at Formula E as an example, which is the intersection of sports and clean energy, this is something that, I think we're going to start seeing more of this. But, I sort of look at it and think about, how personalization is driving a lot of technology now. Everything from fitness to fandom. I think there's personalization that is sort of attached to all of these elements now. And what's driving that is data analytics and AI, right? And so these are the things from my perspective that are really disrupting a lot of the parts of the industry. And we're seeing that in pitch decks sort of weekly, right? With fan engagement. And I think you could probably go to a football game now, and there's so many different fan engagements, you wouldn't have to watch a single minute of football. There's so many different things you could do, which is probably overkill, but still.
Well, I think for the younger audience, I think there's a lot of solutions that's targeting them. With ADHD and all that, I suppose it's one of the things that a lot of people are working on. I absolutely agree with Garrett. I think what Garrett's talking about is sort of technology influencing each of the verticals that we were discussing before, whether that's AI, whether that's crypto, whether that's data. All of these things are driving each of these different sectors. There seems to be a few questions in the Q&A about a different sector that no one's mentioned so far, and that's in terms of sports performance as well as youth sports. I'll open this one up to the floor since this wasn't a question on our list. So anybody have any thoughts on that particular subvertical?
Yeah, I'll jump in here again. So when you think about youth sports as an industry and how inefficient it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago when we were growing up, when coaches had clipboards and, it was so difficult, and there was so much inefficiency in that system. And we're seeing now that there are great businesses that are really addressing some of those friction points to allow for greater participation, whether those are coaching apps, whether it's performance apps. There's lots of new technology that's really making it so much easier for participation across many levels.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that space, whether it's, dealing with concussions and monitoring head impact to, new data, even within a baseball, a basketball, real-time data that wasn't previously available, and I think inefficient is a way to describe it. I mean, it's a huge market out there. People are still trying to figure out what the right way is to connect. And I think another big piece of it is, coaching and how to monetize, a virtual coaching world. And there's a lot of solutions that I've seen come to the forefront on that, trying to really break through. It's a really crowded space right now in the last year.
Yeah, I
Hey, you know,
spent
I
2 years running a startup in the youth and high school sports space called Sportle back in before we started Beyond the Game Network. My only word of caution to startups in the space is it is wildly fragmented. 50 state associations, not 10,000 high schools in America, 100,000 travel and youth sports teams. There's no one place to go for this. While the youth sports market has tens of billions of dollars in spend every year, if you're a parent and you've been involved in travel sports, even if you've got the money, you generally are feeling bad about all of the money you're spending, the excessive amounts of money, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 a year to do travel sports. Even though it seems like there's a lot of money sloshing around, most of the programs are strained to the point of breaking, and excess cash flow is really hard to get after. It is very hard to monetize businesses in the space, and we really haven't seen a breakout hit. There's really no company that's come out of that sector that's like tunning it, gone public, sold for $1 billion. There just hasn't been that kind of hit in the youth sports space. Still waiting to see if that's possible.
Why
That's,
is that, do you think, Brian? Just to follow up on that really quick. Sorry.
Just the massively fragmented nature of the marketplace. It's so hard to reach the end consumer. And it's just so expensive for parents to cover the cost of youth sports that even if you're very wealthy, if you're spending $5,000 like I was on my daughter's travel volleyball team, even if I could afford $6,000, I didn't feel good about the first $5,000. I sure didn't want to spend more.
Yeah. I'd add into that, Brian. You make a really good point. I haven't even looked at it from that angle. I agree with everything you said. I haven't even looked at it from that angle. You're also competing with that fragmentation with tax subsidized park districts and schools and really established organizations out there. I wanted, if it's all right, Sam, I wanted to touch on something Joe had said, and I don't think we should gloss over it. The whole concussion conversation. I've gotten quite a few, in this category. I've gotten quite a few proposals. There have not pursued any of them, primarily just because of the uphill climb. We go from the fun sports tech space to really the medical and healthcare field, and it's kind of a different animal in itself. So I've stayed away from it, but I don't think. I think we do need technology in this place, really for the future of American football with youth athletics. If you've looked at the numbers, they've continued to decline in participation in American football for kids, largely because of concussions. So I think that there is a huge opportunity in that space if someone could come up to it. So I know there's entrepreneurs and founders listening right now. I would encourage people to keep exploring that category.
Yeah, that's one area that we're looking at as well. My co-founder is worked for the NFL for 5 years, and she's examining quite a few concussion-related startups in that area. So talking about startups, these questions are great. These right in. So what are you guys looking for in startups in terms of investment? What are some of the key factors that you're looking at? Brian, maybe I can start with you again.
Oh, sure. The general things that all VCs look for, regardless of industry, strong management team, good investors around the table, a big open market with large possibilities. For us, beyond those, we're looking to tie into some of the key things that we invest around. Lately, it's been around mobile gaming, metaverse, NFTs, at-home fitness, connected health monitoring, direct-to-consumer media. Those are kind of the key themes. So we're looking for things that align with our themes, that specifically for Beyond the Game, where our athlete network can get involved in a direct-to-consumer company and help them grow around those themes, and kind of ticking the normal boxes of things that VCs look for.
Right. Yeah. So let me rephrase that a little bit for the rest of the panelists. Is there anything different that a sports tech startup that you would look for versus a regular startup? And who I got next? Joe?
I mean, I would say yes, and that knowing the sports space and what's going to be an early adopter, and the product market fit's a big piece of it, especially here. There's a lot of great ideas that people have around sports that there's just not a market for, and so we've seen a lot of those, and that's where we use our network to really kind of vet things a bit. But really, no, there's not a whole lot that's really different. I mean, we were earlier investors. So I mentioned, Starstock, when we invested in them, they had a great team, not even an MVP, but, good backing. And we just had belief in them. And it turned out, we got in early, and Andreessen ended up buying out their A earlier this year. So, it's really using our expertise. That's why we focus on is using our expertise to there. But, I don't think it's really much different than anybody else looking at different, companies.
Yeah. Joe? Oh, no, sorry, John.
I would say just specific to this space, to keep it like right in line with your question, I guess. I would first, the concept has to matter, right? It's always going to come down to the product itself. But if you could get a celebrity a name with it in that sports space, I do think it goes a long way in terms of getting to the market faster. And I don't mean just paying somebody for an endorsement. I've been with 4 different companies now I can think of off the top of my head where they've put that celebrity, that big name on the founder side of the table. So not even just like, it's not just advisory shares. It's not just, hey, this guy's one of our investors. They're actually one of the founders from side by side with you. And the acceleration to the national attention that comes with the PR from that is monumental.
Right, that would be pretty distinct to the sports industry, I think. Stefan, is there anything different from the European perspective?
I wouldn't say it's the European perspective, but I would potentially add that I would always look at the company where the product or the solution is also applicable to a market outside sports. Because coming back to concussion, for example, that is a perfect example. I will not encourage any team to build something like that, as I think it's super cool to have it, but I might doubt that the market is big enough, serving all the pro athletes playing football and having a solution for that. Depending on the fund metrics you have, the market size might simply not be big enough. And that's what I see, at least, that there are many teams finding a super cool solution, which might be a super cool company, simply not for venture capital. Because, thinking of the fund metrics, you cannot invest in a business which potentially makes 10 million turnover on a 30% EBITDA, which is a cool company, but simply not cool for a VC fund. And that's why I would always look for something which is, and I think that's what we mentioned at the beginning, which is cool of sports, because you have close relations. And Garrett, you mentioned you can go from sports to healthcare. You could go from sports to entertainment. And I would always look for a solution where you have this, coming from this top of the pro athlete or top fandom to a broader mass market. That's what I would always look for, particularly in sports. I think many teams are so fans of what they are doing that they are not really figuring out how big this market is, considering then a VC investment. Again, doesn't mean company can be cool, but simply not fit the VC metrics.
I think that's a really interesting point, because I think all the VCs kind of think that way, right? You're looking for scalable, you're looking for adjacent markets, but I think at the same time, some of the areas that we've described as perhaps not quite investable into, sports performance being one, youth sports, and then these concussion and medical. These are great areas that someone should be investing into, and there should be great companies being built, and they may not be 100 times X kind of companies, but someone should be investing into them, I feel. Garrett, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we try to understand real value, right? Where's the real value in this? And, I'll give you an example. So 5 years ago, at least once a week, I would get a deck or a pitch from someone that was doing something in daily fantasy. And we're different and we're doing it this way. And they just piled up. And quite honestly, I don't have anything against it, but it's not my area of expertise. I'm not a fantasy sports person. But it was a signal that, for me, that it was just completely an inflated space that everyone could get into very easily. And there was no really differentiation of value. Now it's once a week, there's something in NFTs. We're going to take this, celebrity or athlete, and we're going to, and we're the only one that's doing this. I'm like, guys, this is the third one this week that's doing this exact same thing. Well, we have the relationships and there's no real value there. And the same is happening now with NIL, right? It's like, oh, we're going to be this part of the business. And I think you really have to understand, from the founder side, you really have to understand and engineer the value proposition in such a way where it's so compelling and it's so differentiated that there aren't going to be 50 others in the same month that are doing the exact same thing. So you really have to be able to stand out.
That's a really, really good point, I think. Just to follow up on that and this opening up for all the panelists, in terms of technology, right? And ultimately, we're talking about sports tech, that technology is vital to this piece. Are there any, is there anything there that specifically that you guys are looking for, or that you think could be something that would be fantastic for this market?
Yeah, the main thing that we've invested a few times now around is things that will allow athletes and others, whether they're pros or weekend warriors, to know their body better. We invested in Aura Ring, we invested in 8 Sleep. There's other fantastic companies out there. I mentioned earlier Whoop, but there's just tons of interesting things happening. The ability to take those body sensors, make them smaller, make them more portable, get more information, process that information, provide feedback, things like constant glucose monitoring that folks like Levels are doing. There's just so much interesting thing happening with people's ability to understand their body and how it's performing, and using that, whether it's being used for pro athletes or just everyday folks who want to get a better workout or just live a healthier life. That is something we believe a lot in. We think there's going to be tremendous changes over the next decade there.
Anybody else?
No, I mean, I think
to
it's just different. Somebody's doing something different than anybody else is doing it. It's got to be easy to understand what they're doing. It's got to really stand out, because we get into so many crowded spaces. Somebody's got a really truly unique idea. Like we were looking at, FitGuard. We haven't invested in them, but they've got the mouth guard for measuring concussions and head impacts. Like, all right, that's different than anything else we've seen out there. I can see somebody using this. It's not obstructive to the athlete. All right, here's a different take on a problem out there. Let's give that a solid look. That's one example.
Yeah, and I'd kind of reiterate where Joe was going with that a little bit. A space that's not crowded. You ask them, like, what are we looking for? I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'll know it when I see it. You know what I mean? And when I see it, it's because I haven't seen 20 other similar proposals the last month. So I know it's out there. I know there's ways to innovate this space. Some of the things that we've talked about, though, has kind of been there, done that a little bit. So we'll see different twists on that.
Well, I think for some of the areas that are hot that we mentioned, and you're seeing a lot of companies rushing in. I guess we touched on it a little bit, but what specific advice would you give to these companies in order for them to stand out? Right. I mean, we've covered a little bit in terms of, hey, maybe do something a little bit different with the technology, provide some extra value. But anything else that you guys think could make people stand out on that side?
Yeah, stop using buzzwords. Like, please solve a problem. And I don't care if you're using the blockchain. If you're solving a problem and you're making something more efficient, we'll get into the technology. But I get it, it's really exhausting to have just buzzwords thrown at you, like, over and over again. And I think, founders think like, oh, this is probably the first time I'm hearing that there's a blockchain, and I have to like, guys, just, focus on solving a particular problem, and not using just whatever, chatbot or drones or, wearable or whatever the term du jour is. That's just for starters. A little bit of a rant, sorry.
I couldn't agree more to Garrett. I would just add, for the early stage startup, what I would look at is real strong focus on sales all the time. I think what is often totally underestimated is how hard it gets, and that's what we discussed before. Have some clever tactics. If it's boarding on a superstar or whatever, have really focus and don't underestimate how hard it is to get the first customers on board. Especially when you are, and that's something we could discuss for the next evening, especially when you are in the B2B area in sports. I think a lot of those clubs and organizations are now faster than before COVID, but they need to change their structure. And it sometimes takes really long, even longer in the sports industry, in the B2B area, to get onboarded. That's at least what I see, and don't underestimate that. Have enough sales power on board.
Yeah, I'd build on what Garrett and Steven said. If you're an early stage startup, just prove someone wants what you got. If you're selling a product, if you're providing an app, prove someone will buy from you, prove someone will use your app over and over again. Just get real narrow in those early stages and just prove that somebody likes it, and then find a second somebody that likes it, and a third and a fourth. Don't worry about being everything to everybody in those early stages. Work within the resources that you have, both human capital and money, and just provide some value to someone. And if you can do that, and you can start to see some momentum in that, more someone's finding value in what it is you do, then you're on the right track, and you can start to build from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think if you look at kind of the nascent verticals or ecosystems like NFT or NIL and compare that to esports, which is a lot more developed, there are so many different areas in esports where you could build a startup, where you could build services, whether it's B2B or B2C, where you're not seeing that in the NFT or NIL market at this time. All you're seeing are just marketplaces, right? I'm sure there are, as those areas grow, that there are potential tools and services that could be provided to some of the companies that are in the industry already, or innovative new ways to directly reach all the consumers. And I think that's probably what everyone is saying, and just echoing that. I think we're running up on time here. Just wanted to give a last word to everyone. Brian, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, just excited about everything that's going on in the space. A lot of fun in this conversation. Be doing interesting things in sports and media, esports, gaming, fitness. Reach out to us at Beyond the Game Network. We're thebtgnetwork.com on the internet. Thank you all.
Cool. Joe?
Yeah, and again, just reiterating, appreciate Kiwi Tech, you guys inviting me to be a part of this. This is what I love to do. So I've gotten into it, is meeting startups and seeing presentations and seeing what's new out there and what founders have. So I'm excited to see the presentations coming up, and want to keep doing it. So yeah, appreciate it.
John, any last words?
Thank you, Sam. My advice would be, everyone knows we have to prove of concept, but then also the market size. Not generally speaking, think about the market size for your concept. And if you could show that to a firm like ours, and the numbers make sense, it makes the conversations so much smoother. So John at glencrestglobal.com if anybody wants to reach out. And thank you, Kiwi Tech, for doing this.
Over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, all I could add at this point is potentially one of my mottos is that every day without sports is a lost day. So I'm trying to keep up with sports like in every manner. Thanks for having me. It was a great discussion. Thanks for Kiwi Tech, Sam. Great moderation. And yeah, I'm available, and I'm just seeing how everybody's adding me on LinkedIn, but I'm also Niggemeier at Capitanova are available. Thanks for reaching out, and thanks for having this. It was a great pleasure.
Thanks so much, Stefan. Garrett, the last word.
Wow, so much pressure. My takeaway is I have to figure out how to get Emmys in my background.
There you go. I was eyeing that as well.
That's ridiculous. No, this has been great. Sam, thank you. Thank you, Kiwi Tech, for having me. I'll turn the conversation a little bit towards the direction Stefan was going, which is, sports is a magnificent thing that we're all in this industry together. It's a small community. I mean, it's a global community, but it's tight, and it has the power to bring people together in a way. And I think we just saw that in Tokyo at the Olympics. Yes, I'm biased, but let's not forget that it has that element, and it may be the last real true global force for good, bringing us all together and celebrating humanity in a really positive way.
Great. Thank you so much, Garrett. And thank you to all the panelists. I think everyone can see that we're all very excited about this industry, and it's a very special industry. So thanks everyone for being here and sharing their thoughts. And back to Kiwi Tech.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sam. And thanks to all of our panelists on behalf of our hundreds of guests today. We sincerely appreciate all of your wonderful insights and perspectives shared, and that was great. So thanks again, everybody.